She was one of America's most remarkable women until the government took the only home she had ever known. This is the incredible, true story of Lizzie Caldwell. Our story begins in the spring of 1855, amid the vast rolling mountains of Haywood County, North Carolina. The Cherokee had named this great valley the Cataloochee, which literally meant rows upon rows, and referred to the endless sea of mountains that walled in this valley. It was here that a baby girl named Mary Elizabeth Howell was welcomed into this world. Affectionately known as Lizzie, the young gal soon became her father's greatest treasure. Now, although he would have never admitted it, Lizzie held a special place in his heart amongst his 5 children. Albert Howell was a deeply religious man, the sort of fellow who made certain his entire family was firmly seated in the front row in those rough wooden pews down at the Methodist church, each and every time a circuit-riding preacher rolled through the area. Now, those visits generally came on the 3rd Sunday of each month, providing that there was fair weather and passable mountain roads to allow for it. But one thing was for sure, that traveling preacher man could always expect a warm meal, a place beside the fire, and a bed beneath Albert and Eleanor Howell's roof. You see, faith stood at the very center of their small world. Every evening, the family gathered around the warm glow of the hearth, while Mr. Howell read aloud from the good book. And later at bedtime, Winnie knelt beside each child's bed and prayed for the Lord to watch over each of them through the night. That's right. In all that he said and did, the loving father tried to set an example of what he believed a godly man should look like. But living in this remote part of the Great Smoky Mountains during those days, no, it wasn't for the faint of heart. The entire Howell family had to be resilient and hardworking just to make ends meet. And even though Lizzie was the youngest, she worked right alongside her older siblings. And together, those youngins labored just as hard as their ma and pa ever did, and they never complained. You see, their family was largely self-sufficient. I mean, they grew and raised and made nearly everything they owned. But at times, there were certain necessities that they couldn't produce at home, such as sugar, salt, or coffee. And to purchase those types of things, a man needed money. For this reason, Albert sometimes left home for weeks at a time to work as a cattle hand, driving livestock out of the Smokies and down into flatland country. And that was a dangerous proposition. You see, that crude road over the mountain was known as the Cataloochee Trail and was once used by the Indians. Yet the reality was, it was little more than a narrow and twisty animal path that ascended up and over the jagged mountains. One wrong step could send a man and his horse down the sheer cliffs, tumbling to their deaths. Yeah, each trip was a risk, to say the least, but Albert never blinked an eye when it came to doing whatever it took to provide for his family. And while he was away, the youngins were responsible for tending to the daily chores and helping their mama keep the homestead running. Even at a tender age, they all understood that mountain life offered little time for idle hands. This was the world that Lizzie grew up in, and for 7 winters and 6 summers, she blossomed into a bright and highly intelligent girl with boundless curiosity. As for schooling, no, there was no such thing as a school where she lived, but her father had taught her how to read from the family's Bible. And because it was the only book in the cabin, Lizzie read its pages over and over until many of its passages were committed to memory. The stories carried her imagination far beyond the mountains that surrounded her home. Some of her favorite heroes were Daniel, who bravely faced the hungry lions, and Samson, with his long hair and incredible strength. And who could forget about Ruth with her unshakable loyalty and faith? Indeed, Lizzie never tired of reading their stories. Yet, just like the Bible, life is full of chapters. And although she didn't know it, this chapter of Lizzie's life would come to a crashing end in the summer of 1862, when her father tragically died on a cattle drive in South Carolina. And with 5 mouths to feed, her mother knew she couldn't provide for them all, and it was then that Eleanor Howell had to make the most difficult decision that a mother has ever made, when she gave up her youngest daughter, Lizzie, and sent her to live with her 2 brothers, Berter and Garland Ferguson. For the first time in her life, Lizzie left the Smoky Mountains when she moved to her uncle's home in Waynesville. There, she discovered a world unlike anything she had ever seen. Wide dirt roads bustling with businessmen and buggies, and stores full of shiny new toys and beautiful dresses in their windows, and church bells that rang every hour of the day. And best of all, there were even school bells. You see, her uncles lived in a big brick house that stood at the corner of the 2 main crossroads in town. All day long, travelers came and went on horseback and foot. The young girl's eyes widened with amazement at every new sight and sound. Why, there were nearly 200 people living in the community. And Lizzie, well, she never dreamed that there could be that many people in the entire world. You know, it's remarkable how resilient children are in the face of tragedy. And though Lizzie continued to mourn the loss of her father, she gradually found her footing and even began to thrive in Waynesville. Thanks to the lessons she received from her father in front of the family hearth, she was already one of the top readers on the very first day she stepped inside of a schoolhouse. And soon, she was the tops in the class in spelling, writing, and mathematics. Even in music class, it was Lizzie's sweet soprano voice that was the jewel of the school choir. But alas, these were very turbulent times in America's history. The war between the states was raging across the South, and folks in western North Carolina, well, they considered the Union's actions as Northern aggression. And therefore, Lizzie's uncles felt the call of duty, and in 1863, they were swept up in the conflict when they joined the Confederate Army. For the next 2 years, Lizzie learned to live with a degree of independence that few children her age could have imagined. She cooked her own meals, got herself to and from school and church, and helped look after her uncle's home and affairs while they were away. Lizzie carried herself with a sense of duty and determination of a trusted adult. The hardships of mountain life had prepared her well, but the war forced her to grow up far sooner than any child should have been asked to. And as for that war, well, it nearly broke the Garland brothers. They fought in Vicksburg and the Atlanta campaigns. And after seeing thousands of men killed in those battles, they soon realized that there was no glory in killing a man. Garland was shot several times and taken as a prisoner of war, where he nearly died from his wounds. And by the time they returned in 1865, both brothers were completely changed. You see, when they returned home to Lizzie, they believed it was only the hand of God that had spared them, and both of them would spend the rest of their lives giving thanks. Together with Lizzie, they started and ended each day holding hands in prayer. They became active members of the Methodist Church, where Lizzie was now leading Sunday school. Truth be told, the Garland brothers had a profound influence on Lizzie as she grew from a young girl into womanhood. The seeds of faith that had been first planted by her father were carefully watered and nurtured by her uncles. And through their guidance and example, those seeds took root and shaped the woman that she would eventually become. As the years passed, Lizzie developed into the sort of person that we should all aspire to be. She was kind, generous, gracious, and deeply devoted to what she believed in. And by the time she reached her teenage years, she had already become a school teacher and was instructing local children inside the Garland home. The little girl who had once learned to read from her family's Bible was now passing the gift of knowledge on to others. She remained deeply involved in church and devoted much of her time caring for the elderly members of her community. Folks around Waynesville often said that there was no finer young lady than Lizzie Howell, and that a person couldn't ask for a more loyal or dependable friend. Lizzie had truly been tested by fire, yet she emerged from those trials with a remarkable strength and grace. For all that she had already endured, the loss of her father, the separation from her family, and the hardships brought on by the Civil War, her extraordinary journey was only just beginning, because it would be what happens next that would define Lizzie Howell as one of the most remarkable women in American history.
Give someone you love the gift of old-fashioned storytelling. 5 books for the young and old alike that will make your heart smile. Click the link below to order your copy of the Appalachian Storyteller today, also available on Amazon.
By the fall of 1878, Lizzie was 23 years old when she met a stranger who was traveling through Waynesville. His name was Hiram Caldwell, a dashing, mustache fella, tall and handsome. And Hiram, well, he was immediately taken by Lizzie's soft-spoken beauty, and over the next year, Hiram made countless trips to visit Lizzie in hopes of one day earning her affection. And eventually, love did blossom, and by the winter of 1880, the couple were joined together as husband and wife, and Lizzie bid farewell to the town that she had spent the past 14 years in, as she moved back to the Cataloochee Valley with her new husband. Her life had come full circle as she returned to her childhood home, walled in from the outside world. The same small community with one church and school. Well, this was all Lizzie needed, and she quickly became involved in both again. The newlyweds originally moved in with Hiram's mother, who still lived in a crude log cabin. But Hiram, well, he wanted nothing more than to give his new wife a home that she would cherish for the rest of her life. And like her father, Hiram was a cattle driver who was gone for long periods of time, leaving Lizzie and his mother to tend to the farm and the crops. Not that Lizzie minded. It was a simple life, and that was where her heart was at ease. And over the next decade, their young family grew, with each spring bringing a new baby into the Caldwell home. The couple were blessed with 4 healthy children. However, like any mother who's ever lost a child, it was the death of Lizzie's baby boy, John, who passed away before ever reaching his first birthday, that forever took a piece of his mama's heart. The death of her son was something that Lizzie carried silently inside of her heart for the rest of her life. Hiram was a good husband, and he was always wise with his money. And for the first 20 years of their marriage, he saved nearly every penny that he ever made from buying and selling cattle. And when the time came that his father died and left an inheritance of 150 acres of prime farmland that ran along the Rough Fork Creek in the heart of the valley, Hiram took his life savings and purchased a water-operated sawmill that he set up on the banks of that creek, and over the next 5 years, he sawed each board one by one until he finally fulfilled his promise to Lizzie by building her a beautiful 2-story house. It was the very first frame house in the entire valley and was painted white and trimmed with Lizzie's favorite color, blue. And that house, well, it became the heart of the Cataloochee Valley and the official boarding house of every weary traveler who came into the valley, where Hiram and Lizzie welcomed them all. It was even said that any preacher man who came to the Catalooch had to stay at the Caldwell home, or Hiram, well, he would just flat out refuse to attend the church service. And inside the walls of the home, the entire Caldwell family grew and loved together for decades, all outside of the watchful eye of the outside world. Lizzie never once left the valley. In 1922, after 42 years of marriage, Lizzie buried her husband Hiram next to their infant son, high on a hilltop overlooking the valley and their home. And now, at nearly 70 years old, she had become the matriarch of the Catalooch, the wise old woman who still taught Sunday school down at the Palmer Chapel Methodist Church and at the Beech Grove School. She was blessed with a passel of grandchildren, and as much as she had been through, there was much to be thankful for. And by the late 1920s, the Cataloochee Cove's population had swelled to over 1,200 people, making it the largest settlement in the Great Smoky Mountains, nearly twice the size of Cades Cove. Yet, nothing lasts forever, and in 1928, the United States government came calling. And as a famous president once said, the most dangerous words a person can ever hear is, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." You see, it was in the summer of that very year that Lizzie Caldwell and every other soul in the valley heard the church bells start ringing. Only there was no service that day. But those bells, they rang over and over in a distinct pattern. 3 bells and then silence, and then 3 more bells. For hours they rang until everyone had gathered at the church in a crowd that spilled out all over the lawn. Folks feared the worst. After all, 3 church bells signaled death. But no one in attendance was prepared for the words the preacher was about to speak. It was then that Reverend Davis tearfully told the congregation that the government was taking the valley through eminent domain to turn it into a national park. Anger erupted as many men flat out refused to give up their ancestral land and threatened to dynamite the only road leading into the valley. But in the end, it was all futile, and one by one, every acre of land was purchased for pennies on the dollar and turned over to the National Park Service. Lizzie Caldwell and her son's family were among the few who opted for lifetime leases and tried to remain in their homes. But the government, well, they put up unbearable restrictions on them. They could no longer cut firewood on their own property. They couldn't hunt or fish, and no longer could their livestock graze in the valley. And even if a bear attacked their animals, they couldn't shoot the bear. It became nearly impossible to survive. And sadly, on the morning of March 12, 1934, Lizzie cooked her family one last breakfast in the home that Hiram had built for her. And then they packed all their belongings into the bed of a pickup truck, and at 80 years old, Lizzie Caldwell left the Cataloochee Valley for the second time in her life. Now, she was never the same. And when she died 3 years later, they lovingly carried her body back up over the mountain and into the valley, where they laid her to rest beside Hiram and her son John on a hill that still overlooks their home to this very day. As I researched Lizzie's life over the past month, I began to feel a kindred connection to her story. And I don't know about you, but it broke my heart to learn that everything she and her husband had worked for their entire lives were taken from them in the very end. And the more and more I thought about it, it became clear to me that I wouldn't simply be able to walk away from her story. I needed to see where her life had played out with my own eyes. So I hopped in my Jeep and I set out for the Great Smoky Mountains in North Carolina, bound for the Cataloochee Valley. Wow, so here we are. After all this time of me telling you about Hiram and Lizzie Caldwell's story, here we are. Their house is still standing, still painted the same color that Lizzie had chosen. Here we are in front of the same creek where Hiram set up his little sawmill and cut all of the planks for this. It was the first frame house in this entire valley that he built just for Lizzie. This place, I can't tell you how incredible it is here. It's surrounded by mountains on every side that are up to 6,000 feet high. There's no cell phone, there's no electricity, Wi-Fi, GPS, nothing, even to this day. And a treacherous mountain road leading to it all. I can't imagine the freedom that they felt right here. Let's go in and take a look at it. I spent the entire day exploring Cataloochee Valley. I could truly feel Lizzie's spirit everywhere I went. But I needed to find one last place before I left, and that was her final resting place so I could pay my respects. And as I was walking through the cove, I saw a small patch of grass that had been cut that led up a steep hill. And I can't explain it, but something inside me felt sure that this had to lead to Lizzie's grave. Man, that was the steepest hill I've climbed in a long time. As my great-grandpa Charlie would say, steep as a cow's face. But look here, lo and behold, there is a cemetery here. And when they said go rest high on the mountain, they weren't kidding. Can you imagine that? Living down there in that valley your whole life, never once leaving here, And when you died, they just put you on the hill. Well, there she is right there. Look at that. There she is. Right here. Mother. At rest. Miss Mary E. Howell Caldwell. March 17th, 1855. August 25, 1937. Just 3 years after the government took her home through eminent domain, they carried her back here and buried her beside Hiram, right here. So there you go, my friend. Now you know the true story of Lizzie Caldwell, someone whose story has nearly been lost to the hands of time until now. It was my honor to tell her story, and my hope that she'll never be forgotten. I would love to hear your thoughts on her life. Do you think it would have been better to have lived in a valley locked away from the outside world? Is it possible that that's what kept families so closely bonded back in those days? Much different than today. I look forward to your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching this episode, and be sure to like and subscribe for more true stories from Appalachia's past.